Hello, welcome back to Broyhill on Aviation Leadership. Before we get into the 15 episodes that will deal with the 15 leadership traits, I thought I'd provide you some context for those discussions. Sorry to make you sit through a PowerPoint. I wish I had the technology so that you could see me and the slides at the same time. Perhaps, though, enough useful information will be gleaned from this that you won't mind it too much. The context that generated the discussion, by and large, is the current very demanding environment for personnel in the aviation industry, particularly in business aviation. You can see the numbers there from the Boeing Pilot and Technician Outlook study. Those are some pretty big numbers to fill cockpits and to fill technician slots also. Now I know if you're watching this during spring 2020, which is when I'm uploading it, and the current COVID-19 crisis is in full swing, and airplanes aren't flying and people aren't traveling, just keep in mind this is a temporary condition, and the aviation industry, like most travel-related industries, will kick back into full gear once we get through this crisis. So we are having a very brief hiatus in this otherwise very enormous problem, and it is a problem. And the problem we're having in business aviation is keeping our people inside our organizations. I've always envisioned the retention equation like a three-legged stool, where if one leg is either missing or not emphasized enough, the stool topples. The retention equation is the same way. We have to look at all three elements of it: compensation, quality of life, individual value. They all need to be present, they all need to be equally emphasized, or the personnel stool will topple and we'll lose people. Started the research efforts in 2017, did a qualitative study focused on why people, in this case pilots, were leaving business aviation for the airlines. We weren't discriminating against the other groups. Pilots were just the only group that responded with statistically significant numbers. What we discovered was very interesting. Inside of business aviation organizations, there were two distinct groups. There were pro-airlines pilots, those pilots who had considered or were considering going to the airlines, and anti-airlines pilots, pilots who just weren't interested. And those pilots were statistically different groups in that when they answered every question on the survey, each group answered with statistically different mean answers. Now, if you're trying to get your head around that, hang on just a minute. I'm going to show you an example of that in an upcoming slide. The desire for a better quality of life was the number one reason why pro-airlines pilots were considering leaving and going to the airlines. So in 2018, we did a quantitative study. We wanted to know how bad the problem was. Guess what? It's pretty bad. Between 2015 and 2018, almost 2/3 of the operators we surveyed lost at least one pilot to a position somewhere else. 1/3 of the operators we surveyed lost at least one technician. About 1/3 of the pilot force changed jobs. About 1/5 of the technician force changed jobs. Better compensation was the number one reason why they made that decision. So in 2019, we wanted to go after the third leg of the stool, the individual value / morale leg. And that's a function of leadership and the resulting organizational culture. That led us to the focus of the study, which was the impact of leadership on retention. That immortal quote by Dr. Edgar Schein, I think, says it all in terms of the way leadership and culture are inextricably entwined. So of course, to conduct a study, you need a survey. So we sent out a 30-question survey to about 23,000 recipients. Of those, 1,010 gave us usable data, and that's enough to be generalizable to a larger population. You can see the layout of the different questions. Some of them we will deal with in this presentation, others I'll deal with at the end of the series. So first demographic question, what type of operator responded to the survey? Most of them Part 91 corporate operators, not a surprise, that's the lion's share of the population. Not quite evenly divided between non-Fortune 500 and Fortune 500, but almost so. The next thing we wanted to know is what was the core skill of the respondents? Vast majority pilots, again, no surprise given the population that's out there. The interesting thing is in the upper left-hand corner, that green piece of the pie says management. There was no separate answer for management on the survey. These are people that checked the other block and in the line or blank provided wrote in a manager's title or management or leadership. So rather than identify with their core skill area, they identified as leaders or managers. This is probably the most important demographic question we asked, and it's one that figures prominently in the rest of the answers. We asked what the level in the organization was of the person who responded. You can see that on the left we have 5 divisions of personnel, and on the right we have 2. What we did is we combined the accountable executives, department managers, and high-level managers into the leaders category, and the line employees and the low-level managers, those who have manager in their job title but probably have 0 to 1 direct reports, in the followers category. Pay attention to those 2 groups because they will become very important as we discuss some of the answers in the survey. First question we asked was about the elements of retention. What will keep you here? No surprise in the different elements and then the order they came in. Obviously, smaller is better here. Quality of life was the first thing people wanted to find. Cash comp the second, benefits the third. But those last 4, leadership actions and attributes, organizational culture, individual value/morale, opportunities for advancement, are all within the realm of the day-to-day leadership of the organization. And to an extent, they may be confounding variables. But the point is, those are the elements that leadership has a direct impact on a daily basis. So here's the first big question we asked. I am considering leaving my current organization. Strongly disagree is coded 1, slightly disagree is coded 2, neutral/undecided is 3, slightly agree 4, strongly agree 5. Look at the overall mean, the leaders mean, and the followers mean. Now you would think that the leaders and the followers being 0.8 apart, that makes them different. Guess what? Not so much. Remember we talked about whether groups were statistically different or not. In this case, that's not the case, because Levine's test generates a very low value of F and a higher value of P, which means that from a statistical perspective, the means are not statistically different, so the leaders and followers are basically aligned in their answer to this question. But in this question, not so much. If I am considering or were to consider leaving my organization, the quality of department leadership would be a factor in that decision. You can see the overall mean. This time the leaders mean and the followers mean look pretty close together, like 0.3 apart. But this time Levine's test, very high value of F, very low value of P. P is essentially the chance that we're misinterpreting the data or the data occurred randomly. So from a statistical perspective, leaders and followers are thinking differently about the answer to this question because the means are statistically different. That should give you a little cause for pause. And the final question we'll cover for this presentation, can leadership affect retention? And of course, everybody would agree that it can, and it does. Leaders and the followers are both aligned where that's concerned. But this is pretty interesting in that this is something that we regularly state our opinions about, but we don't have any data to back it up. Well, guess what? Now there's data. From here, we're going to discuss the traits that affect retention. There are the 15 of them that we'll cover in the upcoming episodes. In each one of those episodes, I'll provide you a brief definition of the trait, maybe throw a little statistical data at you about the trait, but then I'm going to relay a personal anecdote from my career, some of which are inspiring, some of which are not so inspiring, others which are humorous. Hopefully that will give you some additional arrows in your leadership quiver to enhance your own leadership walk as you go forward. Everything that we covered in this presentation, everything we will cover in the upcoming episodes, can be found in much greater detail in my book, Business Aviation Leadership from the Traits to the Trenches. You can find it at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and other online retailers. Signed copies can be purchased through my website. All net proceeds are donated to the NBAA Leadership Conference Scholarship Fund. This is a gift to the industry. Nobody's making any money on this whatsoever. Now, if you're looking for something more entertaining, perhaps a bit edgier, please check out my novels. 5 of them are out there now. The 6th one is in development. They can be found at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and other online retailers. And signed copies can be purchased at my website, www.chrisbroyhillbooks.com. In the meantime, thank you for your attention. Thank you for subscribing to my channel. Stay tuned for upcoming episodes on the individual leadership traits. And in the meantime, stay healthy and tailwinds to all of you.